It's time for Brush Street Beat, presented by our friends at McLaren Health Care. And joining us is a very good friend of the show, Evan Woodberry of M Live. Evan, you're in Lakeland right now. You're probably really enjoying the weather. I know that's probably the number one thing about being down there.
Yeah, actually, it's actually been a little bit warmer than usual for this time of the year. Usually the beginning of spring training is when you have those cool mornings and cool nights. And then the end of spring training is when it finally starts to get hot and actually feels kind of good to go back up north. But it's been warmer than usual. So while the rest of the country has been digging out of snow for a couple of weeks, it's been really nice in Florida.
Hey, it's not too bad in Detroit either.
That's what I've heard. I've heard it's gotten better.
It's like 40 and breezy.
That's very manageable. That's doable.
Yes, Evan, I have always referred to you as the international man of mystery because every time we've talked to you, you're always in a different locale. We know you're in Florida, but have you visited any exotic places in the world? Tell me you've gone to like Iceland or something.
No, really, I did get to Colombia a few times during the winter, because it was easier this time of year because it's not like you're going to be called to Comerica Park for a press conference. Even if that happened, they'd be doing it all virtually. Everything is virtual now, so it really didn't matter where you were. So I got to travel some this winter, but now I'm back in Florida, and it's a different spring training. Usually the great part about spring training is the access, getting to talk with players and coaches and just kind of hang out and chill out. And it's totally different, but it's better than nothing, and certainly better than it was last March at this time when we were all wondering, when sports was going to come back at any point at all. So, and there are fans in the stand, and that sounds like a small thing, but just to have the background noise of real fans instead of pumped in crowd noise, that does make a difference. And it's a little bit of normalcy on its way back.
Evan, as you mentioned, things are obviously a little different in Lakeland this season, but what are you noticing from the players' aspect? Are things as intense as they normally are? Are they less intense? What's the atmosphere like from that aspect?
Well, I think it's interesting because obviously for spring training, there's a certain number of players who, regardless of what happens, they're going to have a job in Detroit. And there's a certain number of players who, regardless of what happens, are probably not going to have a job in Detroit. But there's also a lot of competition and a lot of players for whom this spring really does matter a lot. Not only because of the job battles, but also because this is the first time with a new coaching staff, a new manager, a first time to make an impression on a new group of guys. I mean, I think of the backup catcher position, which is pretty much wide open. Jake Rogers, this is a spring where what he does, both offensively and defensively, really is going to matter. And, unfortunately, today he had another strikeout. I think he has 3 or 4 strikeouts in a row. And you have to think, okay, maybe this is a guy that might be pressing a little bit too much because although these may be sleepy spring training games, these are at-bats that really count. On the other side of the coin, I look at Akil Badu, who's the Rule 5 draft pick. I think he's probably going to get more at-bats than just about anybody. And he got some more looks today. They want to get a long look at him. They want to see if he can potentially be someone that they can carry on the roster this year. And so this is another spring for him where it is going to matter. His actual results in the games that we see are going to matter a whole lot. So I think that makes it a little bit more interesting and probably adds some intensity there that wouldn't be there. And even for the guys who probably don't have a real strong shot of making the club, who are probably going to end up in Toledo, this is still a chance to make impressions for later in the year when A.J. Hinch and Al Avila are talking about who to add up to the roster. This is the first time to make those kind of impressions. And so for that reason, I think, maybe there's a tad more intensity than there might be in just a normal spring.
Evan, I'm really fascinated by the interaction that this young Tiger club is going to have with this managerial staff or coaching staff, which by all regards, everything you read is pretty impressive. How different is the mood or A.J. Hinch compared to Ron Gardenhire, as we know, the old crafty veteran guy? Not that A.J. hasn't been down the block himself a few times, but can you see a difference already?
Well, in some respects, they're similar in that they both really put a lot of emphasis on the fundamentals, little things, especially in spring training, like the cutoff man and defensive plays. And there was a rundown in today's game that AJ made a point of emphasizing, a nice play by Harold Castro at first base that he made a point of emphasizing. So in that sense, they're both focusing on the fundamentals. I just think it's having a new coaching staff, having a fresh set of eyes on the players, and having a fresh voice, having a new voice. George Lombard is the bench coach, but he's actually working pretty hands-on with the outfielders, and that's something you don't normally see because the bench coach is basically the right-hand man of the manager, and it's not usually a guy that handles a position grouping, but he's been out there working with the outfielders. And I think just having a fresh voice, a new way of doing things, a new way of looking at things has been helpful. And like I said, I think it works the other way as well. From AJ Hinch's perspective, this is his first chance being able to offer an evaluation on the players that he sees. Every time there's a new regime that comes in, there might be favorites of the old staff that the new staff isn't as high on, or there might be guys that the old staff wasn't as high on that maybe the new staff takes a fresh look at and says, well, this guy could possibly help us. And I think you see that in every coaching transition, and I think that's why this spring probably has a little bit more impact, because this really is truly the first time for AJ Hinch to see a lot of these guys in person. And with AJ Hinch, I think having a larger role in maybe personnel decisions than Ron Gardenhire was. Ron Gardenhire was from the old school mold of, you just give me the players and I'll manage them. AJ Hinch has a front office background, and I think he probably has the type of situation with Alavila where he can offer more direct input on some of the personnel decisions. And I think that's another thing that adds importance for the players, that this is a guy you want to make a good impression with.
Evan, the Tigers have now played 2 spring training exhibition games, and I would guess that everybody's impressed with how Willie Castro has performed in those 2 games. I want to ask you if there were any other standouts in the games that you've seen so far.
Yeah, they've played 3, and Willie's played in 2 of them and had another home run today, and they have not been cheap home runs. They've been pretty mammoth shots, so I think that was really impressive. I liked what I saw out of Nico Goodrum yesterday, I believe it was, because he had 3 really nice at-bats coming against right-handed pitching, which is the side of the plate that he's struggled with, hitting from the left side against right-handed pitching. So that was good to see. He worked a walk and 1 at-bat, had a couple nice hits. I think by and large, just the quality of the at-bats has generally been pretty good. Obviously they've faced some guys that have had some control problems, or maybe that we're not finding the plate, but they also had the patience to work some walks, and I think that's encouraging to see. And that was something that's been a little bit of a point of emphasis with AJ Hinch, and the fact that the last few years, honestly, the Tigers have not been a real high on base percentage team. They have not had a whole lot of guys who are going to draw a lot of walks, and that's something they sought to address by going out and signing Robbie Grossman, a guy that gives a little bit longer look at the plate, a little bit better look at the plate, and that's something that they're trying to impress on the young players, that's going to be a point of emphasis this year.
Evan, I look at it. Number one, did the Tigers get Torkelson an electric can opener? I think Tiger fans are really kind of worried about that. So you think he had one in his locker when he showed up with a couple of stitches in his right index finger?
I think AJ Hinch made sure he was not going to forget that. And yeah, absolutely. It's going to make sure that he has all the appliances that he needs at his disposal from here going forward. But we got to see Spencer Torkelson today for the first time, made his debut really, really briefly. He came in as a defensive replacement, played about, 1 inning at third base, and then got 1 at bat in the final inning today and drew a walk. But, it was obviously nothing you want to read too many conclusions into. But as AJ Hinch said, it was impressive simply because this is your first at bat ever officially as a Detroit Tiger. He was going up there swinging. He wanted to hit, but yet he was able to work a walk in a count where they'd given him a lot of high fastballs. So it was a nice debut. Nothing terribly exciting. You're not going to save the ball from drawing a walk, but in a spring training game. But for the fact that Torque has been a Tiger for a long time, this is the first quote unquote real game he's been in, and the fact that he hasn't played baseball since Arizona State in February or whenever it was. So it's been a long time for him in a real game, and so I think in that sense it was kind of notable too.
Evan, will also see Miguel Cabrera for the first time in Wednesday's spring training game. And Miguel Cabrera, he's going to be crucial to the Tigers offense, as he always is. And AJ Hinch has talked about the fact that Miguel Cabrera may make some appearances at first base this season. What do you make of that decision, if in fact it does happen?
Yeah, I think it's something that, it's been something that Miguel has wanted for a long time now, really since he moved to a more or less full-time DH role a few years ago. He feels more involved in the game. He's happier when he's getting to play first base at least some. And I think, the reality is that maybe if the Tigers had an all-star first baseman right now, or they had no question marks at all at first base. Maybe AJ Hinch might have to diplomatically tell Miggy that, you're better off at DH. But the reality is the Tigers have Jamer Candelario. They have Renato Nunez, who is a minor league free agent signing, who can potentially get the job. But they have an opening, so to speak, at first base where it would actually make a lot of sense and potentially be really helpful if Miggy could play 10, 20% of the time at first base. Maybe just making one or maybe 2 starts a week would be all they would need to ask for him. And that would really help the lineup flexibility. It could give other guys a chance to DH on those days.
How about Casey Mize started today against the Pirates? We're doing this on Tuesday. 2 innings pitched, no hits, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts. If there's one thing I love about Casey Arthur Mize, it's that he doesn't lack confidence. How important is it for him to really bounce back from which was, I'm sure, a pretty disappointing major league debut last year, regardless of the circumstances?
Yeah, I think that's the good thing, is that he is really confident. He's really smart. He's really analytical. And I think he's taken a lot of lessons from that experience. And, it may be to a certain extent that he's too much of a perfectionist. But in that sense, last year was also a good learning lesson, because, it's tough to be a perfectionist at the big league level when you're facing the caliber of hitters that you're facing. And, you have to learn how to accept failure, which is something that really, for the most part, in his career, he hasn't had to deal with a whole lot of.
Evan, we will continue to be in touch with you throughout the rest of Tigers spring training as opening day quickly approaches. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's always great catching up with you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And a big thank you to McLaren Health Care for presenting Brush Street Beat right here on the Word on Woodward.